Welcome to the CEO Bros Podcast, After Hours, with Brian Baldoff, co-founded, grew, and sold VHT Studios. Brad Baldoff, CEO and co-founder of By Your Side Autism Therapy Services. Matt Croak, the consummate entertainer, jack of all trades, and serves as our host.
Welcome to CEO Bros. It is After Hours.
Cheers.
By the
Welcome.
way, I'm drinking bourbon tonight, and I've never done bourbon, and I know there's a whole bourbon is a whole underworld that is crazy. Yeah.
Plus, you have about an hour and a half drive home, so let's be careful on how many bourbons you have.
All right.
But it's a small glass.
It's a small glass.
Welcome to, so today we're going to talk about creating a budget. And as I heard them talking about earlier, if you don't have a budget, start one because it's absolutely essential. So we have two CEOs who know a lot about running a business, who know a lot about budgeting. You know, this is what we're going to dive into.
Starting a budget, thinking about budgeting, for me, I learned it back in high school. It's kind of funny. We were all sitting with these neighboring schools.
You had a class in budgeting?
No, there was all the president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer of like 20 schools got together in this big council. And we were talking about, and we were having like this big powwow session of
United Nations.
What do you, like United Nations, like how do you earn money? How much money do you have in your account? What kind of things are you doing to, booster your school up, and how do you run your P&L? And so our treasurer was a good friend of ours, but just an absolute, just crazy knucklehead when it came to money. And so every school went around and said, well, we got $34,000 in our account. We're budgeting $8,000 for, these two dances and this car wash. And we had a bake sale and we made $4,000 and we have $18,000 in our account. Everybody went around, big surpluses, 12 grand, 38 grand, 42 grand. People are talking about how much money they're budgeting. And then our buddy treasurer goes, all right, so this is kind of embarrassing. I mean, we're 1,700 in the hole. And he goes, I ordered a bubble machine that never showed up for prom. He goes, a bubble machine was like $3,500, which I thought was ridiculous. He just goes off. He's talking about his bubble machine and how we're in debt. And everyone's looking at us like, how could you guys be in debt in high school? Like when you guys don't you guys have bake sales and this? Or we're all like just like, we don't know what the hell you're talking about. So budgeting was important to us early on. We learned if you don't budget and you just spend recklessly, you will find yourself in a whole lot of trouble. So it's a good topic.
Yeah.
Should go right into budgeting. Brian, you got some thoughts on the budgeting side that you want to debate?
It just brings a lot of angst because it was 35 years of budget battles, whether it was at the Fortune 50 company I worked at or my own company when we were small or once we got bigger. It's just one of those things that nobody likes to talk about it. And every year it seems to change, like let's try it this way or try it that way. And
well, it's something you can't avoid, though. I mean, you
right? Yeah, I would agree with that.
You agree that if there's one thing that we would pitch, Matt, I think as CEOs, that you have to establish a budget, budget
to me,
process.
It's the ultimate prioritization tool. At the end of the day, the budget is what you, generally the CEO, thinks is most important.
But it's so funny because when I hear these conversations, they always seem like a no-brainer. Communication, budgeting. But this sounds like another one would of course you need a budget. But I'm guessing I would be surprised how many people either are not budgeting or are not following a budget, and it's a problem.
So it's really not the budget, it's the process, of budgeting that is key to success for any business. How you how you make your decisions, how you communicate those decisions. I mean, it starts with, if you're a sole proprietorship, it's relatively simple because you're the only one making the decisions, but you still have to decide, how much am I allocating to rent? How much am I allocating to marketing? How much am I allocating to my sales effort? How much am I allocating to, operational type expenses? And usually, it comes down to, the simplest budgeting process is my fixed versus my variable. Like, okay, rent, it is what it is. I just got to put it in. My pay, it is what it is. The insurance, it is what it is. Marketing, do I want to spend 10% of my revenues on marketing, 30% of my revenues? Because then it starts to get into your ROI.
But why don't we go back though? I mean, so as I think about budgeting, like we go into our budgeting process every year for By Your Side. We talk about our budgeting. Did you, Brian, used to go from like a zero up, or did you go from a baseline standpoint? So did you allow a department to go, I'm just going to add all the things I need from zero and let it add up to whatever I think I need? Or did you conversely go back and say, you spent $17,000 in marketing last year. What do you need more or less of? Because we spent $17,000. What are you looking to add or remove? You know, obviously you'd like to probably remove,
right?
And they probably want to add. So that, Matt, one thing would be baseline budgeting. From my standpoint, would be you're starting with last year's actuals, right? And you're looking at it and you're going, okay, we spent $100,000 that on last year. That's our baseline. So are you going to allow that department to spend X percentage more? You want them to be flat, or are you expecting a reduction? Versus the zero up budgeting is, what do you need to do marketing this year? What do you want to start with? What do you want to do? What are your programs? They have advantages and disadvantages. We typically take a baseline budget, or I'm sorry, our leaders come back and say, well, I'd like to, I want $50,000 for the budget this year. Why is that? Well, because we had $45,000 spent last year, and I want $49,500 because I want 10% over last year. And I'm like, well, how do I even know that the $45,000 was right, and that you didn't spend too much last year? So it's always an interesting process. To Brian's point, it's not just the budget; it's the process that you go through and how you reach it. But for those that don't have a budget, or at least don't have a process to establish a budget, you're starting way behind.
And I ask this for someone who wants to be CEO. Is it understood that departments are going to pad the budget, and you just go like, yeah, that's going to happen? Or do you really try to say, no, we need
to drop it just a big sandbag. Kaboom.
Yeah, like is that a given? Like, hey, I don't know. Like, is that part baked in the cake? Or are you really trying to say, what do you need? Or do you allow yourself to go, okay, I know that human nature, everyone's going to pad it. And
assume the worst and hope for the best.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Right. How did your departments use?
Like, how did you handle department budgets, like when they came in?
So we did an episode on details. Me and my head of finance went through every single item with the requesting manager. So in some years we did zero up, and some years we did baseline. It was basically like, if we were growing, we would start with the baseline. Okay, what we spent, we're going to assume everything worked last year. Let's start with the baseline, and then tell us what we're going to do to grow the company. We would usually set the growth targets. Like, hey, we want to grow the company by 20%. What's it going to take? Don't tell me it's going to take a 20% increase in your budget, because that's not going to fly. We want to be efficient about this. And so then everybody would come and add on to the baseline. If things didn't go well during the year, we started zero up. It's like, okay, you think you have 6 people in your marketing department? You have 0. Now justify
each one
what you need for this coming year. And then, some years we would give people a number, and they would come back with how they would spend it. Other years they would put in a wish list, and then we would, have people present. And I'm kind of mixing up, previous companies I worked at, and when I worked for the phone company. When I worked for the phone company, it was a big event, and it was a battle royale. Wow. Because everybody came with their wish list, and they tried to get you to come in with a reasonable wish list. And but at the end of the day, everybody had to fight for the thing they believed in most.
Well, I guess that's a better way of saying it. Do you know you have to fight because someone says, well, I'm going to go in with $100,000, but really I hope to get it to 80 because I know it's going to be cut? Or would you advise departments, don't do that? Come in with what you need, because that's not going to help me to know that you're really trying to get below this.
I tell my leaders, come in with what you think you need and a wish list of what you'd like to do.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is because their wish list.
So you're talking about, here's what it takes to run the business as it is today. Here's what it takes to grow the business.
Here's what I need. Here's what I'd like. But what I like, I really do think would help the business, and here's why.
And the reason why I also say bring a wish list is because I also think it spurs on innovation. I think that my group, when they know they can spend, when they know that they may have some extra money coming their way, it's interesting some of the ideas they develop. Because we may say, well, that's actually interesting, Brian, that you suggested you want to spend $15,000 for that. I really love that idea. Can we take $15,000 out of another area that may not be working for us to implement that $15,000? So it's part of it is to spur the creativity, to spur the innovation, bring ideas forward that you don't think might be approved, but bring them forward. Let's see what they are, because we may all collectively agree, well, that $20,000 we spent last year actually wasn't well spent. We didn't get a great return on that, or we didn't think that activity worked to the satisfaction that we thought would come about. And so why don't we change it up? Why don't we pull that out, put that in? Yeah. And so I think the creativity and innovation of coming through with a wish list is part of the reason why I do that.
That's an interesting perspective, because even you saying battle royale, I think a budget is fights, and you're saying my perspective is a budgeting process can actually, for a CEO, it could spur innovation and creativity and brainstorming that could help the business even farther down. That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you're going to get it without something else being cut. It could be cut in your own department.
But your brainstorm could lead to something down the road in 2 years.
And I do tell my leaders that up front, that, hey, you might get something. You also may lose something. Somebody else may lose something for that. But we are working together as a team to work a bottoms-up budget off of a baseline, because the baseline is what actually too, after so many years too, I was making a joke about, is the baseline, hey, did you guys spend too much last year? But the reality is the baseline's now been established for several years. So it's not like you came up with some crazy number out of left field. If you're a new
company, you really don't know.
Yeah, for a new company, you're starting, you got to do it from a zero up. And I agree with Brian on two things. One is you literally have to review every single line item of the budget. Don't take anything for granted. Every single expense item, challenge, question, and ask about. Because if people are just like, well, it was there last year, or I just assume that's what we need. It's like, no, we don't need to assume that. So that's number one. And then two, make your team members or make yourself go through the process of, do you really need that? Does that absolutely have to be in the budget, or can you live without it? And so I think those are two necessity items of generating and creating not only a good budget, but taking it through the right process.
Yeah, I'll give you an example on the details. One we ran into every year was trade shows. So the marketing department would have $200,000 in for trade shows. The sales team would have $200,000 in for trade shows, and we'd say, okay, well, aren't we going to the same shows? And they'd be like, oh, well, this is for the hotel. On the sales team, this is for the hotel and airfare. It's like, well, what's the $200,000 in your travel budget then? So we had to go down a level and say, okay, let's break out all the expenses. We're doing this big show in Vegas. 2 people from marketing are going, 2 people from sales are going, flights, hotels, whatever. It costs $10,000 to get the booth. It costs, $10,000 to get the handouts and the materials and stuff. That event is $50,000 for the company, because otherwise it gets double counted and it's wishy-washy, who's paying for what. So the process starts with 2 things in my mind. One is, what are my my profit requirements? What's my net? For VHC Studios, it was 10%. So net profit, that was the base number. And then there's also a growth number, how much do we want to grow these years? So those are the 2 factors that I, as the CEO, control, that kind of dictate what we're going to do in the budget.
And this is good because we talked about process earlier. So let's there's a lot of great ideas going back and forth. So let's stick on the process of starting a budget. So that's what you want to dive into. That's what you're kind of bringing up again.
Right. Yeah. And whether you share those numbers with, people who are doing the budget or not doesn't really matter. But in your mind, okay, if we're making $1 million this year, we can't spend more than $900,000. That's my rule right there. If we're going to grow by, $100,000,
you just grab the mic here,
we can't spend more than $100,000 to do it. I mean, there's been people who've made the argument that we would, but
you mentioned earlier. You said, hey, if I want to grow you said it, but I want to hear what you said. If I want to grow my company by 20%, but don't give me 20% increase in your budget. So how would you handle that? You want to grow by 20%. What do you expect people's budget to go up to?
So I agreed with everything he just said, the way he articulated, which is you want the company to operate at a net profit margin. You want Y growth revenue target. Okay, so that's in our heads. We want to grow by X. We want to realize X net profit margin. Okay, so I agree with Brian on that. The way I go about setting the budget for our team is I put it to the team to say, okay, from last year, your actuals were X. What do you need this year if we are to open this or generate this much more revenue, if we're going to hire this many more people, if we're going to take on this many more clients? Because in my head, I know that the revenue growth is X, and that equates to this many more clients, this many more headcount employees. So I'm worried. I already know the employee headcount, but now I need, what are all the other things you guys need that I don't know? And to Brian's point earlier, it is the process by which you go through and you say, I'm going to go line item by line item, department by department, and explain to me, justify to me why you need what you need. And a lot of times what I'd like to be able to do is just say, our revenue growth is X, our net profit margin is Y, and you don't need any more expense. Justify to me why you need more expense, for what reasons. And if the reasons are justified, then great. Then I'll allow them. I'll put it in there. And provided it's still meeting my my KPIs, my key performance indicators of net profit margin and my revenue growth, I'm good. So I agree what Brian just said. I also, though, like to put it in their shops to say, why do you need anything more than you did last year? What are we missing?
And how does that, real world examples, these are CEOs dealing with people, obviously, how do you deal with those difficult conversations?
Well, I tell them up front that provided we're growing, there will be potentially extra money in the budget. The only problem with that is that every department probably has a justifiable reason as to why they need more money. So it becomes, Brian mentioned earlier about prioritization. So we're going to have to prioritize who gets money. So it's who puts together the best business case for the use of their money. And that's how I look at it. Now, whether that's right, wrong,
and this is
a
CEO's CEO's job. When we talk about being a CEO, we talk about the stress. Your job is going to take 5 departments who all have great, legitimate ideas, but you don't have room for all 5.
Right.
Exactly right.
And there's always a battle line, at least in my history, between revenue, growth, and operations. Because really, I mean, our process always started with revenue forecasting. And we had a baseline that said, well, this is what we did last year. What's going to change? Oh, the economy's getting worse, or interest rates are going up, or we lost that big account, or we're about to win a new account. And we'd make adjustments. And then we would say, and we're going to, try and get an additional $1 million a year in business by doing $200,000 more in advertising. So we build that in. Then the operations team gets it and says, okay, what's it going to take to support this additional $1 million in revenue? And they would say, well, we're going to need, an extra 2 customer service people, more clients, more calls. And one of the things we've talked about several times is revenue tends to, follow a kind of linear path. Expenses don't. Like hiring a new customer service rep, bam, next day, $40,000. Yeah. It's more of a stair step. And so that gets into another issue of budgeting, which is timing. As you were talking earlier, I said, it's got to pay for itself. You get a lot of proposals on, hey, this thing can, grow revenues for the company $3 million a year. It's going to take 12 months of investing to break even before we start seeing that. That's a huge decision for a CEO. It's like, okay, I'm going to spend $200,000 this year with no return, hope for a return in 2 years, versus someone else has got a project that's going to start paying off tomorrow. And some
of these softwares have an onboarding fee of, 5 to 10 grand. So you're going, well, I can't even prove it out for 6 months because I already invested 10 grand to see if this thing even works.
Right. And so it's not as easy as a lot of times you have 2 great ideas or projects competing, and there's no right or wrong. It's up to you as the CEO. What am I looking for?
So there is no right or wrong. It's not easy. So what are you looking for? Let me do this. I love that we're sticking on the process because this can go many different directions. Let's go back before you had teams. You're a CEO. You don't have a team. How did you give me some thoughts of how you budgeted by yourself alone with no input? How were those days?
Well, you look first off and you say, I have no revenue coming in.
How much money do I have?
I have zero revenue. So any dollar of expense I spend, I'm in the hole.
That's so stressful.
I'm in the hole by $1. I'm in the hole by $5. I'm in the hole $10,000. I'm in the hole $100,000. And at a certain point, you go, what can I actually palate before I vomit with revenue not coming in? And that, I mean, I hate to say it, it's not an exact dollar amount. You say, what can we palate? What can we withstand before we don't see something that will impact the revenue line? I mean, that's what it really boiled down to. I can't, for those people that are out there watching, viewing this and saying, well, what is it? Is there another, is it a magic number?
No.
It's not. You could be somebody that's fortunate enough that you have a great investor that says, hey, you know, I'm not expecting to see my $200,000 back. If it's lost, it's lost. And you can be more aggressive, but for the most part, you probably don't have a lot of people that are like, I don't care where my investment dollars are going. They want a strong case as to where it's going. So I think you've got to see, and Brian, I'm sure you feel the same way, is that you've got to see some impact from that spend relatively quickly.
Yeah, when you're new, when we've talked about that.
And you have to be able to pivot quickly. If it means like, okay, my 90-day mark is my mark, and if it doesn't happen at that point, you better say, that's the time frame I set. We're pivoting. We're spending that money somewhere else. We're not spending that money anymore. We have to do something different. But you can't allow yourself to perpetually go past that point in time, that line in the sand that you drew where you say, I'm not going to pass that on budgetary dollars, because you'll run out of money.
How do you stomach marketing money? Because that's
usually the biggest, variable expense that really requires
that can be sometimes the hardest to track.
Decision. Yeah. Because, when you're spending money on things that make money today, a lot of times the argument is, we're never going to get anywhere if this is all we do is invest in today. How do we invest in tomorrow? And so then you start talking about, okay, we got, $1 million more we can spend this year. Let's put $250 towards future projects, $750 towards improving the existing business and cash cow. And those are, to Brad's point, there is no magic number. Every business is different. The CEO or the owner, founder has to look at the environment, the economy, the competition, your customer base, how loyal are they, how steady are they, those are the things that kind of drive those decisions on where do I allocate my precious resources today, for today and or for tomorrow. I always lean towards tomorrow.
He said precious resources.
Precious. Yeah, no. Well, and Brian, I'm sure you can appreciate too. One of the things that I always struggle with is when we set a budget number and we're halfway through the year and we're nowhere near that spend. And then I say, okay, well, we don't need to use that anymore. We're going to repurpose that money. And they'll say, but I have it in the budget. I'm like, but you haven't used it. You've proven you can live without it. You haven't spent it. I'm pulling it back and I'm spending it elsewhere in another area. And people say, well, but it's in my budget. And that's another, it's a challenging thing for a team member because they're saying, I asked for 100,000. You approved 100,000. We're at the 6-month mark and you've spent 10,000 of that 100,000. Explain to me again why you needed the full 100, because we're 6 months in.
Unless it's seasonal.
And what I get back from my team members, and I'm sure there's some of those team members out there watching, will say, but you approved a $100,000 budget. And I'll say, I did, but I also have the right to pivot and change because we're not we're not seeing the impact from that spend that you may have thought of when you set that number a year out. And so that's one of those things where it's like, is the money being spent wisely? Is the money in planning? Is the money strategically being placed to use to realize that revenue? Is it going to help the business? But if it's not, if someone just asked for a number, didn't use it, didn't spend it, and now they're saying, well, wait, don't take it away. I don't think so.
I think most companies have the opposite problem. You get 6 months in, and they've already used up the 100,000.
It's 100,000.
Hey, I need a little more.
So they're both pitfalls. Is it more of a pitfall of new entrepreneurs not budgeting and not understanding the budget, or more of a pitfall of not budgeting for the future and being too tight, and then they only budgeted for today and there is no tomorrow? They're both pitfalls. Which one's a greater pitfall?
I think most entrepreneurs budget too much into the future.
You think
and
into
then
the
wind
future?
up getting caught short, to Brad's point. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, you got to pay the bills. You got to pay the electricity and the rent. So it's a learning process of figuring out, okay, I got to pay the bills, but I want to make sure I still continue to invest. It's one of the reasons, the other issue I wanted to bring up here is the timing of budgets. Like traditionally, people do annual budgets, and a lot of times they do them on a calendar year. So budgeting process starts in October, November, December for the following year, and
That's what we're doing, but you're kind of scoffing at it. We did that.
Most people.
They're gonna. Yes, that's what we're doing.
I don't know about most companies, but my last 35, 40 years, by June, shit is just
Wow, he's been
blown
throughout
out.
how many years? He was
Just
listen to
blown
that
out of the
enough.
water.
Yeah.
No matter what company I was at, by
That's why he's
June.
rebudgeting 4 months into the year, because he doesn't do that.
So I tried to, and maybe it was because we were in tech. Like tech changes, daily, weekly. So you've got to be very agile. So to have a 12-month budget that you're stuck with,
That's fair.
It really puts handcuffs on a tech software company. So
I get that.
What we tried to do was create a 15-month rolling budget that said, okay, let's do the budget for 15 months, and then every quarter, the next 12 months get updated based on the actuals.
Okay, so slow it down for me. So you create first a 12-month budget.
We'd create a 15-month.
15-month budget.
We'd create a 15-month
But after every
budget.
quarter, then
Everything gets revised going forward.
for another 15 months.
Right.
Continually.
So basically what happens is after the first quarter is over, the second quarter can make a couple tweaks, but it's locked in. If some big opportunity came up and we have to change something, it changes everything going forward for the third and fourth quarter. Because I think what the problem a lot of people make is they'll make a change in their budget in the second quarter, and they have no idea how it's going to affect future quarters.
Can you remember any aspect of that budget that was the biggest variable changing? That rolling budget really impacted? Is it simply
Was it a
equipment?
program? Was it
Is it
software?
It was
technology?
usually software. It was
Software.
usually we're going to buy into like Salesforce, for instance.
Sure.
Huge expense. Once you make that commitment, it's like, okay, we didn't come into the year planning on that, but we need it if we're going to go after this line of business. Or
So
if
you're
we're
already
gonna
rolling
do with
along
this
and you
customer.
decide you need Salesforce, and that is not in the budget, and yet here we go.
Right. So you plug it in and see how it impacts things going forward, and then you potentially have to reallocate and go back to people and say, hey, that project that you thought you were going to be able to do in the third quarter, we just traded it away for this other project. Wow. So you don't have that money anymore. And those are tough conversations to have. They may have hired somebody for that project, or they may have been recruiting and interviewing people, and it's like, hey, you know what, we got to stop because something else came up. So that's where I say, the budgeting process really becomes a prioritization tool. At least in our businesses, things were constantly changing. New opportunities, new competitors, new pressures from investors, or somebody where we had to adjust. And if you didn't adjust going forward, you do next year's budget and you go, what the hell happened? It's like, oh, remember we added that thing in June. We didn't account for it in the future, revenue streams and expense streams.
I can think of a specific instance now, looking back, thinking about budgets, where I headed up business development for a tower company, and our president of the company came to me and he said, I want to have this year, because the company's been doing well, I want to have an explosive sales contest at the end of the year. I want to take your top performers out, their spouses, go to a 5-star resort for being the top 10, 15, whatever it was, performers. I want you to go, check out certain resorts that'll put you up. And so here I am. I flew on the for free to Doral, to the Boulders, to the Biltmore. I'm going to these beautiful resorts. Like I'm gonna put up 100
Brad
people.
used up the whole budget.
No.
And every room had a bubble machine.
No. It was free because they knew they were going to be getting 100 rooms and all the dinners and lunches and conference rooms. It was going to be a big deal. And it was so funny. I'm planning this and I'm promoting like the big contest that's going to start in this amount of time, whatever. And then literally we're like right before this thing is going to launch. And our president comes back to me and goes, you don't have 250,000. You have 20,000.
Oh my God.
That's a big difference.
Yeah. And the reality is the actuals throughout the year changed. We didn't
hit the revenue
Didn't
numbers.
hit what we were going to hit. The budget now flips and changes and says, so where I was talking earlier about, hey, you have this money, you do not have this money. It was, you don't have 250 grand. You have, it was 25 grand. And I said, hey, I'm launching this contest in a week. And everybody thinks it's this big blowout contest. And ironically, for those that are by your side, we started an incentive called Hot Shots, which was basically a lottery type where you you fill out these tickets, and these tickets get put into a lottery, and then the lottery's pulled. Well, that's where Hot Shots came from. I came up with a contest that only required 25 grand, and it was a lottery-based drawing.
Nice.
And the top 3 winners got prizes that totaled 25 grand. And it came out still being like this explosive contest, and everybody's like, wow, a trip to Hawaii and a trip here and a trip there. But if they knew what was actually being planned, a $250,000 big blowout sales
I say Lake
contest.
Geneva, Switzerland? I meant Lake Geneva, Wisconsin.
Yeah, exactly. It went from being in Switzerland to Wisconsin.
Well, that's a great story, and I'm sure there's going to be a part 2 to this. We only budgeted a certain amount of minutes for this, and we are past budget. So it is getting late after hours. That was a great conversation. There will be a part 2 because I have more questions, and the topic was flowing. Yeah, budgeting is way more interesting. The process was more.
Yeah, we'll come back, talk about revenue forecasting.
Oh, yeah,
and the budget process.
Yeah.
And just, to me, the takeaway is you can't set it and forget it. It is a tool that you use every day, every month, every quarter.
And it's a process that you should have. So if you're an entrepreneur out there that's starting a business, do not think you don't need a budget, nor do you think you need a budget process, because it's such an important necessity to starting and growing a business. Recommend it's one of the first things you should do.
Well, Brian said you can't set and forget it, but what you can set and forget is you hit the subscribe button and you don't ever have to worry again. New episodes get downloaded so that you can set it and forget it. Hit that subscribe button, email us, follow us on social media. Until next time,
cheers.
Happy After Hours.
See you guys.
More bourbon.
Bourbon.